From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hello and welcome to the UK Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Peter Kelly, and today we've got a guest, somebody I've known for many years, not many years, but a number of years. And I'm really looking forward to this. This is like having your mate in your kitchen to talk about all things psych health and safety. So I'll let my mate in the kitchen introduce themselves.
Oh, hi, I am Dr Judith Grant and I'm Managing Director of the Wellbeing Exchange, and I'm a chartered psychologist and wellbeing strategist. And I really do feel like I'm in Peter's kitchen. We have just spent what is actually 7 minutes listening to him brew a very fancy cappuccino from his coffee machine. Thanks for that.
Thank you very much. We will not mention your pink Smeg.
It is a fantastic coffee machine too. All coffee machine. I like a nice coffee machine. It's good for my well-being.
I do. I think it's the heart of well-being, doesn't it? Actually, coffee machines. If you get the right coffee, you just feel like you're in the zone.
It's the process.
Talking about being, yes, it is. It's very therapeutic to hear the bubble, the steaming of the milk, and the coffee grinding down.
Exactly.
But talking about process. Tell me what you've been up to, Judith, because when I last spoke to you, you were at university.
Yes.
Oh, and then somewhere else, and I'll let you tell the audience.
So last spoke to me in terms of earlier this week. You mean I was at
Yes.
So on Monday, on Monday I was at King's College London, meeting students doing their masters in organisational psychiatry and psychology, and every year I tutor a student on that course. So I was meeting lots of fantastic students, which was brilliant. But that's just a volunteering bit of what I have been up to recently. But I set up my own business a year ago. So I set up the Wellbeing Exchange, properly kind of kicked it off, I suppose, in January. So it's been, 10 months now. Time flies. And it's going really well. So working with a range of different clients, doing all sorts of different activities for them. But the Wellbeing Exchange is all about consultancy, coaching and connecting. It's my kind of the 3 C's. So I've done some coaching with individuals, an awful lot of consultancy now for organisations, and then I've done a few like talks and I really like doing things like this. So obviously coming on your podcast is brilliant because obviously I've listened to it before, so it's an honour to be invited. Thank you, Peter.
Oh, you just know what to say to bring a smile to my face. Thank you very much. Judith, well-being. Where are we? Where are we on well-being and in the UK?
That's a very big question.
I'm sure you have. It is a big question, but I'm sure you have some opinions, and I'm interested to explore those.
Yeah, so I think we're making progress. I think back to when you and I first met, which is probably over 10 years ago now, maybe. And you look at the landscape of well-being in organisations, and I guess there is such huge variety in organisations. In some organisations, things have moved on massively in the last decade. In others, it hasn't. So we don't really have kind of consistency across the activities that organisations are doing. There's also been a huge proliferation of products and services and consultants like me entering the market. There's a lot of people out there talking about well-being, and I am sure that for organisations that can be quite confusing. You're being sold all sorts of different things and promised that everything's going to make a difference. How do you know what's evidence-based, and how do you know what is actually appropriate for the culture of your organisation? Because every organisation is different. So when people talk about best practice and benchmarking and all these, buzzwords, actually it's useful to know what other companies are doing, and absolutely look at the evidence-based, but understanding what is applicable to your organisation. It might be slightly different to another organisation, but first of all, it must start with risk management. And I think that is the challenge with wellbeing at the moment. Coming back to your question, there's lots of great stuff at the kind of tertiary kind of intervention end, but what are we doing in terms of prevention? There's not enough happening at that end of the scale yet. And that's really what's needed, because it's all very well doing resilience training and, training up people to have wellbeing conversations. And that's fantastic. And I support that kind of work, but we need to be preventing the harm in the first place.
Oh, you should have been a health and safety inspector, Judith.
I mean, yeah, that
I would have loved to have gone on site with you. We would have had some.
That's one of the things I miss, actually. I was director of health and wellbeing at Mace, so a big construction company, for a number of years, and I absolutely loved the site visit. I still actually have my safety boots, so if anyone wants to invite me on a site visit, I'm still kitted out. So the hard hat, high vis, but it was just really nice to get out, sort of boots on the ground, and meet people. At the hard face of the work, and really understand the realities of working life, because it's a bit different being in an office than it is out on a construction site, isn't it?
Oh no, definitely, and there is respect for going onto the sites and and having conversations, and as you know, I'm mates of mine's mental health advisor, and so still have opportunities to engage on the sites and that, and and we need to, don't we? I mean, the suicide rates and mental health illness is extremely high in the construction sector, and I guess that's one of our missions really, is to bring that down, and I know. Your work at Mace, it was really looking for the evidence base was really important. And how do you find, actually, because obviously you're going into organisations and you're now consulting and you're advising. How many people are interested in the evidence base?
I suppose when you work as a wellbeing consultant, to some extent your clients are self-selecting, in that, because I go on about the evidence-based a lot on LinkedIn, and that's something that I've always talked about. The people that are coming to me that I'm working with are interested in the evidence base, and that's really promising. So maybe I'm in kind of a happy little wellbeing bubble to some extent, in that the people that I'm working with are interested in it, but what they're also interested in is, how do you apply that? So how do you take that evidence and make it practical? Because, there's obviously a significant amount of research in this area. There are some phenomenal academics looking at all sorts of areas of wellbeing at work and health at work, and so many hundreds of different factors or drivers of well-being. Like, how do you bring all of that evidence base together and then make it practical and apply it to the organisation? And that's the challenge, because the academics, they want randomised control trials and control groups and all sorts of other methodology, which is absolutely fair enough, but trying to get that to happen in an organisation is not always easy. So it's kind of that balance. And I really like all of the work that comes out of the What Works Centre for Wellbeing, as they do, they are pulling together the evidence base for wellbeing, not just within the workplace, but community wellbeing, all of the Office of National Statistics measures. and they put out some really good advice to organisations, community groups, etc., etc. So there are sources of information there for people or for organisations to use, and it's a case of trying to get the budget to be able to put these things in place. But I think the more there can be that kind of partnership between academics and the practitioners, the better. And that's one of the reasons why I still get involved with, even though I finished my PhD back in 2018, I think it was, I do occasional lectures at King's College, and each year I've tutored a student, helping them through their master's course, just because I still like to be involved in the academic side of things. And when I was at Mace, we got all sorts of different universities, did research projects on different elements of our wellbeing programme to give it that kind of external scrutiny. And the more that companies can do that, the better, because you're furthering the evidence base, which is great for the research. And it means that hopefully you're getting something in your organisation that is going to work.
Yeah. It's that external validity, isn't it, really? That sense of that you're going in the right direction. I want to pick up on something you said. There are that many hundreds of things that you can do in well-being. I was, surprised. I just thought it was down to apples and pears and other elements. I mean, sorry, I'm being facetious here.
You love a fruit basket.
No fruit baskets. I'm sorry, I forgot the fruit basket. Yeah. One of the things, Judith, and I've just spoken about previously in the podcast, is the world of well-being has changed and become it's become a conglomerate, has it not, of possibilities of different people putting, different offers, etc., during lockdown and since lockdown. Do you think we'll get to a place where we'll level out some of the what is essentially non-evidence-based approaches, or do you think actually we just got to kind of work within it? My personal preference is not to work. I want evidence-based in the decisions that I'm making, but there is so many things out there which really don't have an evidence base, but they're out there. So I'm just be interested to know how you manage that, and then I'll go on to another question, just giving you the heads up on the World Health Organization's viewpoint on this. So
I think, that's a difficult question. I don't like to think that people will go out of business. That's an awful thing to say. I don't like to think that. What I like to think is that all of those wellbeing companies that are operating in the market will recognise that they need an evidence base and start to build it up to give their products and services that they've developed the oomph or the academic credentials that it works. I think inevitably, with the kind of economic uncertainty and all the kind of global challenges at the moment, some of these products and services will drop out of the market. That is, I guess, natural progression, unfortunately, for many small businesses that start up. It's awful, but it's the reality. I don't know, though, because the proliferation of social media and of the way we consume things, so, the way that sort of search engines and shopping websites and social media, everything's set up is for instant information, and YouTube, instant information. And a lot of that stuff doesn't necessarily have backing behind it. So for the wellbeing market, to some extent, mirrors some of the challenges that other parts of society are experiencing with misinformation, or not necessarily misinformation, but just not having robust information informing the products there. So I hope that the market will become steadier and there'll be more evidence-based, but the reality is, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting, isn't it, that the World Health Organization has chosen to use the word prevention, promote, protect, and support.
Yeah.
And in that context, changing the narrative around primary, secondary, and tertiary, which is what they're effectively describing there. I think it sits easier with organisations to understand what we want to prevent. What is interesting, though, is central to that is good health and well-being, which actually creates a protective barrier, doesn't it? So for those of us who worked on construction sites, we're trying to protect the worker from the inherent risk in the job.
Yeah.
Which is, and what do you think about it? Do you find it that organisations are find it easier to understand now what we're trying to do on this very technical term of primary, secondary, and tertiary?
I think so. It's funny you asked that question. Actually, I just wrote my latest Substack blog, which is set for release on the 10th of October, on all about the World Health Organization and their approach to mental health and the prevent, promote, all of that. So yeah, that's well timed, Peter. So I absolutely agree with it. I think, and in fact, back when I was at Royal Mail, that's the model we were talking about. And I've always said, when my grandma, when she was alive, she had no idea what my job was. Just couldn't. I mean, she was excited when I worked at the Royal Mail because she knew that, what they did, they delivered the post. I always used to describe my job is about managing health risks and creating wellbeing opportunities. And I think that kind of is what it's all about, isn't it? And I think that the primary, secondary, tertiary, or the rebranding of that totally speaks to that, doesn't it? Because it's all very well having the resilience training and, as you just mentioned, the fruit and all those kind of good stuff out there. But if you are killing someone slowly through exposure to silica dust or asbestos, or you are breaking their back through, poor manual handling practices, or whatever else it might be, or you're being exposed to chemicals, their hands are being destroyed, or they've got vibration-related injuries, or they're being exposed to bullying in the workplace or risk of physical harm or stress, or all of these risks. A lot of these, in some of the wellbeing strategies I've seen through my career, not just working as a consultant, a lot of these aren't even mentioned because they're separate. And I think one of the good things at the moment, so one of the positive things, is that different specialisms are starting to work closer together, because health and safety often, that's where the traditional health risks have sat. And yes, they have responsibility around psychosocial risks, although that was perhaps poorly understood and executed before. But those specialisms are now working more with the HR specialisms and the kind of organisational development and the personal development and all of these kind of areas that are all critical for well-being. So when these departments or these specialisms work together, you have a much more balanced approach to managing well-being. And I think that enables you to better meet the World Health Organization's recommendations, because well-being is complex. And that's, I think, one of the things that organizations struggle with, because it's subjective. Each one of us will have a different definition of well-being. And that makes it difficult to kind of grasp exactly what it is and how to address it. But by having a toolkit of lots of different levers that you can adjust, by understanding the risks in the organisation and the opportunities, you can make more of a difference. So yeah, I really like the work that the World Health Organization has done recently, and bringing together that global element as well. So for global businesses, often, it's so easy to look at things with a UK angle, a UK outlet, but actually, or outlook, but there are challenges, similar challenges across the world, but there are also different challenges depending on the cultures that people are working in, and we need to address those in our wellbeing strategies as well. That was a really long answer. No. Sorry.
I know, but
I can talk.
It was a very it was a very long question. Just for our listeners of a certain who don't know what Substack is, do you want to briefly explain?
Oh yeah, so Substack. I'm so down with the kids nowadays. Substack is a blogging platform. It's used by a lot of writers actually, but it's basically a newsletter that I send out every fortnight on there. And there's some really great other people that you can follow on there. Some lots of great accounts.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode.
So that's another way of our message getting out, isn't it? Is using social media to talk about these issues, so that because these are the kind of people who will go to Substack or Reddit or any range of other media platforms to find out. So I think that's really, really, really good, and something really cool. Let's talk a little bit about psych health and safety, but actually we probably have been talking about it. But how, in terms of you see the marketplace in the UK, and its receptiveness to psychological health and safety?
I think it absolutely is starting to come into organisations. ISO 45003 has had a positive impact in that respect because, those organisations that enjoy a BSI standard and like the process, those that have gone through ISO 45001 are obviously having conversations about like the three. But I guess it's been talked about in different languages. I think there's probably still some confusion as to what it means in certain organisations. And that's maybe down to us all as professionals to kind of work on the marketing of it to make sure that people understand exactly what it means. I've seen confusion between psych health and safety and psychological safety in these kind of terms because they're quite close to each other. So I think absolutely more organisations are interested in it. Health and safety, definitely. I think, it's been positive. The changes in Australia have obviously had a ripple effect into the consciousness, I suppose, of companies or I should say not companies, but the health and safety leads within those companies in this country. How they're getting that conversation across within organisations, I don't know. I mean, we were talking about psychological health and safety in Royal Mail when I worked there, was it a decade ago?
Yes.
So many companies have been talking about this for years, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've quite got to grips with it yet. But I think I answered your question there just about.
You did, yeah. And I think that is part of the problem, isn't it? It's the when something becomes a proliferation, such as well-being, other areas can be, can be sort of like avoided, or people, sort of concentrate on that. I mean, recently ESG and now diversity, inclusion have all become part of the landscape.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. You see, psychological health and safety can fit under any of those categories, can it not? In terms of getting the environment right, and so you get sustainable workforces. In good governance is risk assessment, and actually in workplaces we need to look at how work is, the way work's done, and the distribution of that work. So it's been it's an interesting journey, isn't it, to watch? I think, and that's what we've been doing over the last 10 years. I mean, I remember, you going for the Royal Mail job, and at the time, a wellbeing lead in a multinational company was rare, and you very much came at the angle with the mental health. And I think, now we have mental health officers, we have chief wellbeing officers, chief wellbeing people officers, and I think. When we sat down together at Nottingham 10 years ago and had a beer, as regularly done, and he said, "What would it look like in 10 years, Judith?" We'd gone, I don't quite think the landscape would be where we are now. And in part, I'm thankful for that, but it also, with progress comes problems sometimes, doesn't it? And I think that's been something that you've really tried to address. I mean, your focus is about bringing out the best in businesses, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, because the majority of businesses and people working in businesses want the best for people. I know we can be cynical and say, horrible bosses and all of that, but actually most people are good, kind people. And some organisations, if they just need a little bit of a guiding hand to help them understand how to support people better, and understanding that support doesn't necessarily just mean putting in place an employee assistance program, which obviously there are fantastic ones out there, but understanding that support might mean looking at the design and organisation of work, looking at the work environment. It might be that the best thing you could possibly do to improve well-being in that office, for example, might be to fix the toilets. It's kind of looking broadly at at all the different drivers of well-being, and that's what I try to do when I'm working with organisations, is explore all the different areas, and often the kind of the person that I'm working with in the organisation, they may not have responsibility for all the areas that we discuss. But the recommendations that I make will cover multiple areas within a business. So to give them that broad perspective that well-being really sits across everything, as you said, inclusion and diversity, absolutely critical. It's aligned with well-being. The two go hand in hand. Same with sustainability and the ESG side of things. Absolutely, again. These are areas that should be together, and then all the people management. So, and health and safety. So the more that these areas can work together, the better. So that one thing I would encourage all companies to do is have a health governance board or committee or whatever you want to call it, and bring together each of those departments, those specialisms, bring your wellbeing suppliers into it, and work together collectively to look at the kind of the broad drivers of well-being, and kind of collectively address them. And there's also the individual responsibility as well, as we all have, individual responsibility to manage our health and well-being. So it's that balance between managing those risks and creating well-being opportunities.
Yeah. And also, I mean, Judith, you've had an interesting journey, haven't you, over the last few years, and some incredible insight into the experiences of people who with COVID and long COVID, To what degree do you think that's influenced your vigour and enthusiasm for health and well-being? Because the real reality of what happens when we're faced with a condition and what that means to that. So,
well, I mean, without a doubt. So I caught COVID in March 2020, and I was ill for 3.5 years. Really, I was off work sick for 2 years. So, to have been fairly fit and healthy beforehand, to have always been really busy, maybe a slight workaholic. My entire life changed, and it has changed since, really. Like, it's one of those, many people go through these sort of life shocks, and that was a life shock for me, definitely. So it has renewed my vigour for health and well-being, but perhaps in a more balanced way for my own well-being this time. So yeah, I think what it made me reflect on is, when you're in a senior role within an organisation, and certainly really large organisations, you have to, if you're the only person with the word well-being in your job title, you have to look at the population. So you have to look at aggregates and numbers of people. And you don't always forget individuals, because very often you have individuals from all over the organisation phoning you up with their concerns and with challenges that they've got. So, it's an intense kind of role to have. But I think for me, it was at an individual level, I realised, my goodness, all these people who have got ME, chronic fatigue, these kind of conditions that remit and relapse and sort of undulate, and that is millions of people. Organisations are perhaps, or many organisations perhaps, not supporting them as well as they could be, and it's difficult. But so I was totally incapacitated for 2 years, and obviously had also, I talked about it a lot. People want to see my LinkedIn videos, have a look, but I kind of want to move past talking about the, what happened to me for my own kind of well-being now. But it was definitely a wake-up call as to the reality. If you're off sick for that long, you have to think about your safety nets. Like, does your contract? I was very, very lucky in my employer. I am so thankful for them, because I had private medical insurance, I had income protection insurance, I had that safety net. I also had, privilege, acknowledge my privilege, like, I have a family that could look after me and all these kind of things. I was fit and healthy before. So I probably had the opportunity for better health outcomes than perhaps some others. And that is, that's a privilege, that's luck to some extent. But yeah, it was a huge shock. But yeah, for me now, I want to really help organisations look at all of those risks that sit behind. And some of those risks now is like, let's look at your sickness absence policy. Let's look at the insurances, because I know, for goodness sake, the cost of private medical insurance is, it's soaring, the premiums at the moment. But maybe that's an investment worth making. If you look at the costs of people leaving your organisation and your absence rates, look at it across the whole and see what's possible. And instead of giving maybe your private medical insurance to the top guys and gals in the organisation, look at giving it to the people that perhaps need it, who have been bitten the most by the cost of living crisis. I think there's huge systematic challenges in terms of healthcare at the moment that we face, and organisations have a real role that they can play in that. And there are many people who still got long COVID. I'm very lucky that I have pretty much recovered, but there are many people who still are sick with it. And there's the sort of return to work processes, vocational rehabilitation, all sorts of other areas that organisations can explore to better support their people.
Yeah, and I mean, when we first met, I remember it was in the Excel,
Yes,
and
yeah.
with that enthusiasm, sort of thing. And actually, the fact is that we've learned from those experiences, and you've learned from those experiences, and it influences what you do now. And I think that's and your honesty and your sort of commitment to telling that story was and it still remains very important. Before we finish, we normally finish with one humdinger of one thing you want to tell the listeners of what you think should be a priority in psych health and safety and in well-being. You probably said it.
I probably said it. I mean, manage risk. Like, I know it's not like the kind of most beautiful strap line for organizations, but actually, if you can get the basics right, then that's a great starting point to better supporting people. And be kind. I mean, again, maybe like just remember that you don't always know what's going on behind someone's facade, so just be kind. And that's not necessarily about being like soft, it's about being kind.
Oh, I love that. Being kind. That's all. I mean, compassion and empathy in the workplace, and kindness, basic human traits that should exist. That should exist in the workplace. Well, that's been excellent, and thank you for taking this time. So, for our listeners, please do listen on your various different streaming platforms, and we look forward to hearing from you both. We're both active on LinkedIn, are we not, Judith? So,
we are. We do enjoy a bit of LinkedIn.
Judith Grant and Peter Kelly.
Yep.
Thank you for coming on to this podcast. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to speaking again at another conference.
I'm sure we will.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.